When I'm reviewing grant applications, the proposals that excite me most are those that really offer the prospect of digitizing and bringing truly hidden materials to light. Materials from communities that may not otherwise be well represented in the historical record or in digital collections. Applications that take those materials and offer a really comprehensive digitization and sustainability plan for those digital collections.
What makes me most excited about most of the applications is the care with which they are assembled as a whole. They're not just about a well-written narrative.
Receiving applications is one of the best parts of the job, partially because applicants are often so enthusiastic and so passionate about their collections. And when that passion's there and applicants really tell a story about why it's important, that speaks to reviewers, that's fun for us to read, and ultimately makes the case for why the collection is truly important and worth digitizing.
When I first review grant applications, I'm looking for consistency. I take a look immediately at which kind of digital files, formats, what kind of content is being digitized. I read the collection summary, and I'm looking for comprehensiveness and completeness. If there's inconsistent information or information about collections missing, that is a red flag for me.
So one of the big things that we see is insufficient attention paid to critical components of the application. This is especially true for application attachments, such as our rights, ethics, and reuse statement, our sustainability and discoverability plan. We also see applicants maybe focusing a lot on the scholarly significance statement, but maybe downplaying certain things like the diversity and inclusion question, which is a critical component of the application. If there's somebody at your institution, for instance, who's an IP expert that can help you with your rights, ethics, and reuse statement, if you can seek a preservation expert to help out with your digital preservation and sustainability plan, these are all things that are going to strengthen your application.
I expect every application to consider the ways that power, privilege, and access are being addressed in the application narrative, acknowledging that these sorts of issues very much shape the items we're supporting through digitization and preservation. Don't be reluctant to really articulate a clear response to the often ignored "so what" question. Being very clear about the importance of a collection or series of holdings doesn't preclude a certain amount of passion for the work being proposed. Make the reviewer understand why this is important and necessary at this particular moment in the life cycle of the collection or holdings for your institution. Your application should make the strongest case possible for why this collection matters. And the only way to do that is through clear language, without disciplinary jargon, that argues clearly for CLEAR's support. It shouldn't be about the digitization or creation of an online resource or the end product, but how this collection might actually open up new areas of discovery beyond its immediate context.
When working on the application, ask yourself if you need help, and don't be afraid to be honest. If you do, potentially consider partnering with another organization that has more experience. If this is your first time applying for a grant, we of course would welcome an application from you, but it might make sense to consider starting off with a smaller grant program. Once you have a successful track record of grant acquisition and implementation, it's often a lot easier to make the case for these larger grant programs.
The digitizing hidden collections process can feel intense. The initial application process has many questions. It's a near full grant application. I think taking the time, reviewing even the application questions from the prior year, taking a full year, 6 months to pull together information, think comprehensively about the answers, look for partners, look to find places that may have material connected to the material that you're looking to digitize is a great way to prepare for the application. Connecting with staff members and the resources on the Clear Digitizing Hidden Collections website is another great way. Looking at who the reviewers on the panel are, seeing if any of them are affiliated with institutions that are near you or that you're a part of. As reviewers, we're here to help as we can, and making use of those resources, both people and informational, is a really important thing.
Know that we're on your side. Don't be afraid to reach out to us. We have an email address, hiddencollections@clear.org, that we answer for applicants during the open application period. Also, talk to other people who have gotten grants before. Talk to other people that are familiar with the process. Our program staff are often at conferences. Come find us, come talk to us. We'd be happy to learn more about your project.